I'm Anna Willette, 34, and last Christmas my own mother told me to leave the house I'd quietly bought to save her. I was standing in the farmhouse kitchen with my 7-year-old holding my hand. The whole table had gone silent. My sister leaned back in her chair and said it slow so everyone could hear. "This house isn't yours. Don't ever come back." My mother nodded like she was agreeing about the weather. "We'll have a better Christmas without you." I looked down at Lily. Then I set a thin folder on the table, right between the gravy and the good china. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled. Because not one person in that room knew what was inside that folder. Or that 5 minutes later, the two of them would be on that same floor, begging me to take it all back. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where the quiet ones finally set the record straight, and the people who counted on your silence learn what your patience was really worth. If a family ever made you feel like your worth was measured in what you could hand them, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe. Because to understand that folder, you have to go back a full year. A year before that Christmas, my life ran on two clocks. There was the hospital clock, and there was Lily's. I worked as a hospice nurse at a county facility outside Danforth, and I picked up travel contracts when the money got tight, which was often. Lily and I rented a 2-bedroom over a hardware store in town. It wasn't much. The radiator knocked all night and the stairs were steep. But it was ours, and I paid for it myself, and no one could take it. Every Sunday, I drove the 20 minutes out to Millbrook, to the farmhouse where I grew up. My father built the back porch on that house with his own hands. He planted a blue spruce by the barn the year I was born, and it stood taller than the roofline now. My mother, Carol, still lived there alone. She was 63 and 2 years a widow, and she called me her steady one. I used to think that was love. Later I understood it was a job description, because being the steady one meant I was the one they called. Not for holidays, not to talk. They called when the furnace died, or the property tax came due, or a credit card slid past its limit. I'd learned to keep a quiet ledger of it in my head. I never brought it up. My father raised me not to keep score out loud. But I noticed the pattern, the way you notice a patient's numbers drifting before the alarm ever sounds. Something in my family had started running on my account, and no one had asked me first. I told myself it was fine. I told myself family takes care of family. What I didn't see yet was how one-directional that sentence had become. Let me be honest about my role because it matters. For more than a year, I'd been the one keeping my family's small fires from spreading. I paid the overdue heating bill in February when the pipes nearly froze. I covered my mother's property tax in the spring, $800, so the town wouldn't put a lien on the land. I replaced the water heater in June. None of it was a loan. Loans get repaid, and I stopped pretending these would. But here's the thing, people get wrong about me. I wasn't naive, and I wasn't a doormat. I'd already changed the way I gave. I stopped handing over cash, because cash disappeared and the story changed. Instead, I paid the vendors directly and kept every receipt in a folder. If I was going to hold my family up, I'd at least know exactly what I was holding. That Thanksgiving, they had dinner at the farmhouse without me. Nobody called to invite us. I found out from a photo my aunt posted. My mother at the head of the table, Megan carving the turkey, an empty chair I'd have filled. I told Lily we'd have our own turkey, and we did, at our little table over the hardware store. The next morning, my phone rang at 7. It was my mother. She didn't ask how our Thanksgiving was. She asked if I could cover the oil delivery, because the tank was near empty and the company wanted payment up front. $210. I paid it before I finished my coffee. I want you to sit with that timing, the way I've had to. Forgotten on Thursday, needed on Friday. That was the shape of it. Being useful had quietly replaced being loved, and I was the last one to notice the switch had ever been made. You might ask why I kept driving out there at all. The answer was 7 years old and sat in the back seat singing to the radio. Lily loved that farmhouse the way I once had. She loved the blue spruce my father planted, and the old barn where he used to keep 2 horses, and the crooked star she hung on the tree every December. To her, Millbrook wasn't a place my family used me, it was where her grandmother lived and her grandfather's tree grew. I wanted her to have that. I'd lost my own father young enough to know what a rooted place is worth. He died 2 years earlier, in a hospital bed I wasn't allowed to nurse him in because I was too close to it. Near the end, he held my hand and made me promise one thing. Keep the home in the family, Anna. His voice was thin, but his eyes were clear. Whatever happens, keep them a home. I promised. I was the kind of daughter who kept promises, even the expensive ones, even the ones that cost me sleep and savings and time with my own child. So I drove out every Sunday. I let Lily run the fields. I fixed what was broken and paid what was owed, and I told myself I was honoring him. I believe I was. But a promise can become a leash if the people on the other end decide to pull. My father never meant for his words to be used against me. He couldn't have known that the family he wanted me to shelter would one day try to lock me out of the very house I was breaking myself to save. Neither did I. Not yet. That winter, I still thought love and duty were the same direction. I was about to learn they can point opposite ways. My sister Megan was the one who made everything look easy. She was 37, married to Todd Prescott, and from the outside, their life gleamed. New SUV every few years, a boat they used twice a summer, 2 kids in matching coats, and a kitchen renovation my mother bragged about at church. Carol praised Megan the way you'd praise a painting, standing back to admire it. I never envied the boat or the kitchen. What I couldn't square was the math. Todd sold farm equipment on commission, and the farms around Millbrook were shrinking every year. Megan worked part-time at a dental office. I knew roughly what those jobs paid because I'd spent my whole life doing the math on jobs like that. Their life cost more than their income explained. I told myself it wasn't mine to figure out. Maybe they'd saved well. Maybe Todd had a good year. But every so often the gleam would flicker. I once overheard Megan on the phone in my mother's kitchen. Her voice dropped low, saying the word minimum 3 times, as in minimum payment. She hung up when she saw me and smiled too fast. Just juggling, she said, waving it off. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew it in my bones, the sound of someone standing on a floor that's giving way and pretending it's solid. But Megan wore trouble like it was fashion, light and temporary, always someone else's fault. My mother believed the painting. She believed Megan had it all handled, that Megan was the successful one, and I was just the reliable one. It's a strange thing, to be the daughter who actually paid the bills and still be seen as the lesser story. I let it go. I always let it go. That was going to cost me more than any furnace ever did. The work I did put everything else in proportion. Hospice nursing does that. You sit with people at the end, and they tell you the truth because they've run out of reasons to lie. That December, I had a patient named Walter, 81, lungs giving out slow. His family visited less as the weeks went on. One night, it was just the 2 of us, the monitor ticking, snow coming down past the window. He gripped my hand with what strength he had left and said something I carried out of that room. I spent my whole life giving them money, he whispered. I should have given them my time. They'd have remembered that. I held his hand until his breathing evened out. I thought about my ledger of furnace bills and tax payments. I thought about the empty chair at Thanksgiving. I told myself I was different, that I gave my family both, money and time. But sitting in that dim room, I felt the first cold draft of a question I'd been avoiding. What exactly was I buying with all of it? Walter didn't have an answer, and neither did I. My weakness was never that I gave too little. It was that I gave until there was nothing left to give, and called it love, and never once checked whether anyone was giving back. Nurses are good at watching everyone's chart but their own. My pager went off before I could follow the thought any further, a code down the hall, and I let the work pull me back under, the way I always did. I filed the question away. I'd have plenty of time to answer it later in a kitchen I owned, with a folder on the table and my daughter's hand in mine. But that night I just went back to work, and I let the snow keep falling on things I couldn't yet see. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday, and it came by accident. Ruth Calloway had been my father's lawyer for 30 years, and his friend longer than that. She was 70 now, sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who still typed her own letters. She called to ask if I'd looked over the paperwork on the farmhouse yet. I said I didn't know what paperwork she meant. There was a pause on the line, the careful kind. "Anna," she said, "you know the house is in trouble, don't you?" I did not. She told me straight, because that was her way. The mortgage my parents had taken against the farmhouse years back was months behind. The bank had already sent a notice of default. If nothing changed, the property would go to a foreclosure auction in the spring. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear, and the room seemed to tilt. My mother had told me nothing. Not a whisper of it, in all those Sunday visits, all those furnace bills. She'd let me pay $200 for heating oil while the entire house slid toward the auction block. "Who's handling it?" I asked. Ruth's silence was an answer by itself. "Your mother says Megan is," she said finally. "But Anna, I haven't seen Megan do a single thing, and time is short." I thanked her. I hung up. Then I stood there a long moment, listening to the radiator knock and Lily's cartoon murmuring in the next room. "Megan is handling it." That phrase had a smell to it now, like a wound going bad under a clean bandage. I got Lily's coat. I told her we were taking a drive to Grandma's, even though it was dark and it wasn't Sunday. I needed to look my mother in the eye and ask her a question. I already suspected I wouldn't like the answer. The farmhouse windows glowed yellow when we pulled in. My mother opened the door surprised, a dish towel over her shoulder, and her first look wasn't warmth. It was calculation, quick and gone, the look of someone deciding which version of the story to tell. I got Lily settled with a coloring book in the living room. Then I asked my mother about the mortgage. She waved it off exactly the way Megan waved off the minimum payments. "Oh, that," she said. "Don't you worry about grown-up things." I told her I'd spoken to Ruth. I said the word foreclosure out loud in her kitchen, and I watched it land. For half a second her face cracked. Then the mask went back on, and she reached for the oldest tool she had. "Now don't go making a scene," she said, her voice going soft and injured. "You always did overreact. Megan is taking care of it. She has a plan." I asked what the plan was. She couldn't tell me. She talked around it. About how Megan and Todd knew people at the bank, about how everything was in motion, about how I always had to control everything. Classic. When you can't answer the question, put the questioner on trial. "Mom," I said quietly, "the auction is in the spring. Does Megan understand that?" She lifted her chin. "Megan understands more than you think." I looked at that stubborn, frightened face, the face of a woman who'd rather sink with a comfortable lie than grab a hard truth, and I understood something cold. She wasn't going to let me help through the front door. Whatever I did, I'd have to do quietly, from the outside, without her blessing. I gathered Lily and her coloring book. I kissed my mother's cheek at the door, because I still loved her. God help me. Then I drove home already, deciding to save a house whose owner didn't want to be saved. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of tea going cold. I opened the account I never touched, the one I'd built from 3 years of travel contracts, of night shifts in cities where I knew no one, of eating cheap so the balance could grow. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than my family imagined I had, because I'd never once shown it off. I did the math the way I do everything, slow and twice. What would it take to stop an auction? What a place like the farmhouse might sell for at the courthouse steps. Whether a single nurse with good credit and a real down payment could stand in that crowd and win. The numbers were tight, but they weren't impossible. And the more I looked, the more a plan took shape, quiet and complete. I wouldn't beg my mother to let me pay her mortgage. She'd only refuse, or let Megan take the credit, or spend whatever I gave on something else. No. If the house was going to auction, I'd go to the auction. I'd buy it clean, in my own name, with my own money. And then, when it was truly safe, I'd give it back to them as a gift. Mortgage gone, free and clear, a Christmas nobody would forget. I'd hand my mother the deed to her own home with a bow on it. It was the kind of plan my father would have loved, generous and stubborn in equal measure. I told no one, not Ruth, beyond what she needed to do her job, not my mother, not Megan. I've turned that choice over 1,000 times since. Telling no one was my first mistake. It was also, in the end, the only weapon they left me. Because you cannot betray a secret you were never told. The next morning, I went to see Ruth in her office above the old savings bank on Main Street. She had files on the farmhouse going back to when my parents first bought it, and she laid them out on her desk like a doctor showing an X-ray. The picture was worse than my mother's shrug suggested. The default was real. The bank had started the clock. Come spring, unless the balance was cured, the property would be sold at public auction to the highest qualified bidder. Ruth watched me over her reading glasses. "There's only one clean way for you to protect it," she said. "Whoever wants that house has to stand at the auction and win it, with financing already in place. No handshakes, no family promises, cash and paper." She asked if I understood what I was signing up for. I said I did. I asked her not to breathe a word to my mother or my sister, and she nodded slowly. The way a person nods when they've watched a family long enough to know exactly why you're asking. "Your father worried about this," she said. "Money and this family. He worried a lot." I asked what she meant. She just squared the files and said we'd get to that when the time was right. I drove home turning her words over. My father worried. About what exactly? And about whom? I didn't press. I had a house to save and only one winter to do it in. But a small light had switched on in the back of my mind, and it wouldn't switch off. Somewhere in Ruth's locked drawer there was more of my father's voice waiting for me. I'd hear it soon enough, at the exact moment I needed it most. For now, I had a number to hit, and not nearly enough time to hit it. Winning at auction meant more money than I had sitting still, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I worked. A travel agency I'd used before had a contract open in a city 4 hours away, 8 weeks, crisis pay because no one wanted it. Night shifts in a cardiac unit, short-staffed and brutal. It meant leaving Lily with my neighbor Denise on weekdays and driving home exhausted on my days off just to hold her. I took it without hesitating. That's the part my family would never understand. Later, when they tried to paint me as cold. Everything I did that winter, I did for a 7-year-old and a blue spruce, and a promise to a dying man. I FaceTimed Lily every night from a bare rented room. Some nights she cried and asked when I was coming home, and I'd sit in the dark afterward with the phone warm in my hand, wondering if I was doing right by her. But every shift was another brick in the wall that would keep her grandmother's roof standing. I banked all of it. I ate rice and worked doubles, and let the balance climb toward the number Ruth and I had set. By the time the 8 weeks ended, I had enough, barely, with the savings I'd already built. I remember driving home that last morning, sun coming up over the highway, thinking the hard part was behind me. I actually thought that the sacrifice was the auction, and after that it would just be joy, handing them a saved home. I had no idea that saving the house was the easy half. The hard half would come in a warm kitchen, from the people I'd bled for, and it would cost me something no travel contract could ever pay back. But that morning I was just tired and hopeful, and the road was clear, and I was almost ready. The auction was held on the courthouse steps in March, a gray morning with old snow crusting the sidewalks. I wore my good coat and my father's steadiness. There were maybe a dozen people there, most of them investors with clipboards, looking at the farmhouse the way butchers look at cattle. That nearly broke me, hearing them mutter about lot size and tear-down value. My father's porch, my mother's kitchen, Lily's tree. To them, it was a spreadsheet. The bidding started and my heart hammered, but my voice came out level, the way it does at a bedside when everything is going wrong and someone has to stay calm. I bid. A man in a puffy vest bid against me, then a woman with an investment firm's logo on her folder. The number climbed. I kept my face still and my paddle steady, and I remembered every night shift that had built the money I was spending. When the woman finally shook her head and stepped back, the auctioneer looked around, called it once, twice, and brought the gavel down. Sold. To me. I signed the paperwork in Ruth's office that afternoon, my hand shaking so hard I had to steady it against the desk. The deed would read Anna Ouellette, sole owner. Not my mother, not Megan. Me. I sat in my car afterward and finally let myself cry, and it wasn't about the money. It was that the blue spruce was safe, and the porch was safe, and I'd kept my promise to my father with my own 2 hands. I'd done it. Quietly, completely, alone. Now all that was left was the sweet part, the part I'd been dreaming about through every miserable double shift. Giving it back. I'd wrap it up for Christmas. I'd watch my mother's face when she understood the house was hers again, saved, unburdened. I let myself imagine that moment. It kept me warm for months. It was never going to happen the way I pictured it. Here's where a smarter woman might have announced it. Called a family meeting, laid the deed on the table, taken her bow in March. I didn't, and I've made peace with why. I wanted it to be a gift, not a transaction. And some quiet instinct, the same one that reads a patient's chart, told me to hold my cards until I understood the whole board. So I said nothing. My mother went on living in the farmhouse, believing, I suppose, that Megan's mysterious plan had worked. She never asked how the auction resolved. People rarely ask questions when they're afraid of the answers. Through that spring and summer, I kept doing what I'd always done, only quieter. I paid off a nagging credit card in my mother's name, $1,100, because the interest was eating her alive. I cleared a small business loan that had Megan's and Todd's names on it at the local bank, because the bank officer, an old classmate, mentioned in passing that it was about to go to collections and would drag my mother's co-signed credit down with it. I didn't even tell them I'd done these things. I just quietly took the weights off, one at a time, and kept every statement in my folder. Understand what that means. By that summer, I didn't just own the house they lived in. I held the paper on nearly every debt that touched my family, not through some magic clause, through months of transfers and payments, each one boring, each one documented, each one mine. And it was clearing that business loan that showed me the first real crack. Because when I pulled the payoff statement, the original loan amount was far larger than any equipment dealer's wife should have needed. Todd and Megan hadn't borrowed for a vacation. They'd borrowed like people trying to plug a hole in a sinking boat. I filed that away with the rest. The picture wasn't complete yet, but the outline was starting to darken. I saw the crack widen with my own eyes at a 4th of July cookout. The whole family was at the farmhouse, burgers on the grill, kids with sparklers, everyone performing happiness. I'd stepped into the back hall to find Lily a bandage when I heard Todd and Megan through the mudroom door, having the kind of fight married people have when they think no one's near. His voice was low and hard. "We're out of time," he said. "The refinance is the only thing that fixes this, and we can't do it without the property." Megan hushed him. "It's handled," she said. "Mom's on board. She's practically promised it to us already." Todd said something about the numbers not waiting, about a payment they'd already missed. Then a kid ran through and they broke apart. All smiles again. I stood in that hallway with a cartoon bandage in my hand and my stomach turning over. Refinance. The property. Promised it to us. I ran the words like a chart, looking for the diagnosis. They wanted to refinance something using the farmhouse as collateral. My mother had, in her mind, promised them the farmhouse to do it. There was only one enormous problem with their plan, and I was the only person at that cookout who knew what it was. The farmhouse wasn't my mother's to promise. It was mine. Had been since March. Every scheme they were whispering about was built on a foundation that legally belonged to me. I walked back out into the sunshine and handed Lily her bandage and smiled at my sister across the yard. She smiled back, warm as anything, and I understood that the warmth was a tool now. The same tool it had always been. Somewhere behind that smile, a plan was moving that had no room in it for me or my daughter. I just didn't yet know how far they were willing to go to clear us out of the way. As fall came on, I started to feel the temperature drop in ways that had nothing to do with the weather. The Sunday visits got harder to schedule. My mother was suddenly busy, or tired, or had plans with Megan's family. When Lily and I did come out, there was a stiffness in the house, conversations that stopped when I entered, a sense of being managed. Then, in November, Aunt Sandra called me. Sandra was my mother's younger sister, 60, the one honest voice in that family, and she'd never learned to lie comfortably. She was fishing, gently, to see what I knew. "You're coming to the Christmas dinner, aren't you?" she asked. I said, "Of course. We came every year." There was a pause. "It's just," she said, "your mother's been talking about a family meeting that night. Something about the house. I assumed you were part of it." I kept my voice easy. "First I'm hearing of a meeting," I said. Sandra went quiet, and in that quiet I heard everything she was too kind to say out loud. There was a plan for Christmas, there was a meeting about the house, and no one had thought I needed to be told. Lily wandered in just then holding up a crayon drawing, proud as could be. It was the farmhouse, lopsided and bright, with a green triangle beside it. "That's Grandpa's tree," she said. "That's where we have Christmas." I told her it was beautiful, and I meant it, and something in my chest went hard and clear as ice. Whatever they were planning to do to me, they were planning to do it around my daughter's Christmas, around Grandpa's tree. I thanked Sandra and told her I'd see her at dinner. Then I sat for a long while with Lily's drawing in my hands, looking at that green triangle, and I made a second quiet decision. I was going to that dinner, and I was bringing the folder. I went back to Ruth to prepare what I still, at that point, thought of as a gift. That's the part I need you to hold on to. Even then, even knowing they'd frozen me out, my plan was generous. I had Ruth draw up a quitclaim deed, one that would transfer the farmhouse from me back to my mother, free and clear. No mortgage, no strings. I brought my folder of statements and had Ruth help me turn them into something clean. I wrote checks, real ones, each meant to erase a specific debt. One to zero out the credit card I'd been carrying for my mother. One, the big one, to cover the exact balance Todd and Megan were drowning under, the loan their whole desperate refinance was meant to escape. My idea was simple and, I thought, beautiful. At Christmas dinner, at this so-called family meeting about the house, I would stand up and hand my mother the deed to her home. Saved. And I would hand Megan a check that made her refinance unnecessary, because the debt would simply be gone. I would solve the very problem they were scheming to solve, only cleanly, lovingly, with no one losing their home. Ruth watched me arrange it all, and was quiet for a moment. "You're a better daughter than they deserve," she said. I told her they were still my family. She didn't argue. She just slid one more thing across the desk, an envelope, worn soft at the edges, my father's handwriting on the front. "He left this with me," she said. "Told me to give it to you when the house came into question. I'd say it has." I looked at my father's writing, my own name in his hand, and my throat closed. Whatever was inside had been waiting 2 years for exactly this moment. I put it in the folder with the deed and the checks, unopened. I'd read it soon. It would change how I understood everything. I read my father's letter that night, alone at my kitchen table, after Lily was asleep. I want to tell you what it said, because it became the thing I held onto through everything that came after. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered, written near the end. He wrote that he knew his body was failing and his mind was still clear enough to be afraid. Not of dying, of what would happen to us after. "You were always the one who gave," he wrote. "Your mother knows it, and your sister knows it, and I'm ashamed to say we all leaned on it. When I'm gone, this family is going to circle around whatever money is left, and around this house. I've seen it in people my whole life. Grief makes some folks generous and some folks greedy, and I'm afraid I know which way the wind blows here." Then came the lines I've never forgotten, the ones I could recite in my sleep now. "Keep the home if you can, Anna, but don't let anyone spend your whole life keeping themselves warm. You are not a bank. You are my daughter." And if it ever comes down to choosing between this family's comfort and that little girl of yours, you choose her. Every time. Without 1 second of guilt. That's not me giving you permission. That's me giving you an order. I sat there a long time with the letter open in front of me. My father had seen it coming. 2 years ago, from a hospital bed, he'd looked down the road and seen this exact winter, this exact folder, this exact fork where love and duty split apart. He'd known his wife and his older daughter better than they knew themselves. And he'd left me a compass. Keep the home if you can. Choose the child. Always. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope and set it on top of the deed, and something in me settled into place, cold and calm and certain. Whatever happened at that dinner, I already knew the two things I would not surrender: the home and my daughter. If you've ever kept a family afloat and gotten the cold shoulder for it, you already know exactly how this feels. Stay with me, because what my mother was planning for that Christmas table is worse than anything you're expecting right now. Comment, "I've been there," if you know this ache, and let's keep going. My father's order changed how I moved through those last weeks before Christmas. For the first time in my life, I started saying no. The test came fast. Megan called me in early December, her voice honeyed, and after 2 minutes of small talk, she got to it. She needed to borrow $4,000, just for a few weeks, just till things settled. It was the most she'd ever asked for outright. A year earlier, I'd have found a way to say yes, and hated myself quietly. This time, I heard my father's voice. "You are not a bank." "I can't do that, Megan," I said. Simple, level, no apology stacked on top. There was a silence so total I could hear her breathing. She wasn't used to that word from me. "Wow," she said finally, and her voice had gone flat and cold, the honey all burned off. "I didn't think you of all people would turn on family." There it was. Turn on family. As if declining to hand over $4,000 was a betrayal, while whatever she was planning was just business. "I'm not turning on anyone," I said. "I just can't." She hung up without goodbye. I set the phone down and noticed my hands were steady. A year of night shifts, and this was the muscle I hadn't known I was building. The muscle to say no to the people who'd only ever heard yes. I knew there'd be a price for it. You don't take a tool away from someone who's used it your whole life without them reaching for a bigger one. Megan had always gotten what she wanted from me through guilt. If guilt stopped working, she'd find another lever. I just didn't know yet which one she'd choose, or how ugly she'd be willing to get. I found out within the week. And it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at the one target she knew I couldn't shield with money: my fitness to be Lily's mother. The rumor reached me through my cousin Dana, who meant well and couldn't hold water. She called, awkward, circling until it came out. Someone in the family had been saying things about me, that I was working myself into the ground and neglecting Lily, that I was unstable, running off on mysterious trips, leaving my kid with neighbors, maybe not really fit to be raising a child alone. Dana said it gently, like she was hoping I'd laugh it off. I didn't laugh. I asked who was saying it. She got quiet. "I don't want to start anything," she said, which was its own answer. I already knew. The trips were the travel contracts, the ones I'd taken to save the family's house. The neighbor was Denise, who loved Lily like her own. Every fact had been true, and every meaning had been poisoned. Someone had taken the exact sacrifices I'd made for this family and reworded them into a case against me. And there was only one person with the motive and the venom to do it. Megan needed me gone. Not just refused, but discredited. Because a reliable, sympathetic sister with money was a threat to whatever she was selling my mother. But an unstable, neglectful one? Well, no one would question freezing her out of a family meeting about the house. No one would blink if she and her odd little daughter weren't welcome at Christmas. I sat with that for a long, cold minute. This wasn't about $4,000 anymore. My sister was building a story that painted me as a bad mother, and she was telling it to the one audience that could hurt me, our family, right before the night that decided the house. I thought of my father's letter. Choose the child. Every time. I understood then that the fight coming wasn't about a building at all. It was about whether they could make me small enough to throw away. They were about to find out how badly they'd misjudged the quiet one. Over the next few days, I did what I do best. I stopped reacting and started charting. I laid the whole thing out in my mind like a patient history, every symptom in order until the diagnosis was undeniable. Megan and Todd were drowning in debt, the kind that doesn't wait. Their one lifeline was a refinance, and that refinance needed the farmhouse as collateral. To get the farmhouse, they needed my mother to sign it over to them, and to make sure no one, especially me, could get in the way. Megan was salting the ground ahead of time, painting me as unstable so that cutting me out would look like good sense instead of theft. It was, I had to admit, a decent plan. It had only one flaw, and the flaw was enormous. The house they were fighting over wasn't my mother's to give. It was mine. I owned it outright, free of the very mortgage they didn't even know had been cleared. My mother could stand up at that dinner and solemnly promise the farmhouse to Megan and Todd, and it would mean exactly nothing, because you cannot give away what you do not own. They were building an elaborate house of cards on a table that belonged to me, and they had no idea. That was the strange, quiet power I carried into December. I knew the ending they couldn't see. I knew that every scheme, every rumor, every honeyed phone call was being spent on a prize that had already been claimed. Part of me wanted to just walk away and let them find out the hard way, at some bank, when the loan officer pulled the title and the whole thing collapsed. But that would leave Lily's Christmas, and my father's tree, in the hands of people who'd lie about me to get them. No. If this was happening, it was happening at that table, in front of the whole family, in the open. I owed my father's letter that much, and I owed my daughter more. The last piece clicked into place a week before Christmas, and it came, again, from Aunt Sandra. She called me, and this time, she wasn't fishing. She was warning me. She'd been at the farmhouse when my mother laid it all out over coffee, not knowing Sandra disapproved. My mother intended to use the Christmas dinner to announce, in front of everyone, that she was giving the farmhouse to Megan and Todd. A gift, she called it, to the daughter who really needed the help. She'd have papers ready. She wanted it witnessed, formal, done. She thinks she's being a good mother, Sandra said, disgusted. She has no idea what Megan's really up to. And Anna, I hate to say it, but they're planning for you not to be there. Or not for long. I thanked Sandra and hung up, and I sat very still in my kitchen while the whole shape of it finally stood clear in front of me. My mother was about to stand up at Christmas dinner and give away a house she no longer owned. She would promise it, with papers and witnesses, to a daughter who was secretly bankrupt, based on a lie about the daughter who'd actually saved it. And I was the only person at that entire table who would know that none of it was real. That's the moment the fear left me, and something steadier took its place. From here on, I wasn't walking into an ambush. I was walking into a play where I'd already read the last page, and no one else had. Let my mother make her grand announcement. Let Megan smile her tool of a smile. Let Todd count his refinance money in his head. Every confident word out of their mouths would be a person stepping onto a stage that belonged to me, without knowing there was a trapdoor. All I had to do was choose the moment to open it. And I already knew the moment. It would be the second they came for my daughter. So now there was a date on it, and the date was Christmas. 9 days away, then 7, then 4. My mother's meeting was set for the dinner itself, papers and all. Whatever was going to happen would happen in that farmhouse dining room on Christmas night, with the whole family watching. Everything funneled toward that one evening. I could have skipped it. Sandra half hoped I would, to spare myself. But skipping meant letting the lie win by default. It meant my father's tree, my daughter's Christmas, and the truth about who I was would all be decided in a room I'd chosen to leave. I wasn't going to do that. Instead, I prepared, the way I prepare for a hard shift. I went back to Ruth one final time. We confirmed it all, cold and legal. My mother could not transfer the house because she did not own it. Any papers she signed that night would be worthless. The debts I'd cleared were documented and mine. And Ruth, When I asked her, agreed to do one unusual thing. She agreed to come to Christmas dinner. Not as a guest of the family, but as mine. Quietly, in case the truth needed a witness who couldn't be called a liar. "You're sure you want it done this way?" she asked me. "In front of everyone, on Christmas?" I thought about Lily's crayon drawing, the green triangle, where we have Christmas. "They chose the stage," I said. "I'm just going to stand on it." Ruth almost smiled. I spent those last days baking with Lily, wrapping small gifts for every single person who'd be at that table, including Megan and Todd. I want you to know that. I walked in with presents for the people plotting against me because I still hoped, right up to the end, that I was wrong about how far they'd go. I wasn't wrong, but at least, when it happened, no one could ever say I came looking for a fight. I came bearing gifts. They're the ones who turn them into weapons. 3 days before Christmas, Megan tried one more time to move me off the board, and she did it wrapped in concern. She called, and her voice had gone soft and sisterly again. The honey poured back on. "Anna," she said, "I've been thinking. This year's been so hard on you. All that traveling, all that work. Maybe Christmas at the farmhouse is too much right now." I let her keep going. "Why don't you and Lily do something quiet, just the two of you? Take the pressure off. Mom and I can handle everything out here." It was almost artful. She'd taken freezing us out and dressed it up as looking after me. And underneath the kindness was the story she'd been spreading, that I was fragile, overwhelmed, not quite up to family life. If I agreed, I'd be confirming it. If I refused, I'd be the difficult one who wouldn't listen. "That's thoughtful," I said, matching her tone exactly. "But Lily's been looking forward to Grandpa's tree all year. We'll be there." A pause. Then colder. "Suit yourself. Don't say I didn't try to make it easy on you." My pager went off just then. A real emergency at the facility. A patient going fast, and I had to go hold a stranger's hand while he died, which put my sister's phone call in its proper size. But I thought about her words on the drive to work. Make it easy on you. She wasn't offering me an easy Christmas. She was offering me a quiet exit so the theft could happen without an inconvenient witness. I'd spent the whole year being the person who made things easy for everyone else, not this time. This time I was going to be exactly as inconvenient as the truth required. I finished my shift, drove home in the dark, and checked the folder one more time. Deed. Quitclaim. Checks. My father's letter on top. Everything ready. 2 days left. I ran into Todd the day before Christmas Eve at the hardware store below my own apartment, of all places. He was buying an extension cord and didn't bother hiding his surprise at seeing me behind the counter of my own life. He looked me over, the little apartment, the town, and I watched him decide I was beneath the effort of pretending. "Big Christmas out at the farmhouse this year," he said, casual, cruel. "Real milestone for us." I said I'd heard. He smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "You know," he said, "some people just aren't built to hold on to a place like that. Takes a certain kind of family to keep something for generations. No offense." No offense, the little phrase people tack on right after they've meant plenty of it. I could have told him, right there in the hardware aisle, that the place he was already spending in his head belonged to me. I could have watched his face fall. But that would have been a private little victory, and this needed to be public. It needed the whole family to see. So I just looked at him, calm as a Sunday, and said, "You're right, Todd. It does take a certain kind of family." He didn't catch the double meaning. He just paid for his cord and left, pleased with himself, a man walking confidently toward a cliff he couldn't see. I stood there a moment among the paint cans and the snow shovels. A year ago, that little speech of his would have wounded me, not built to hold on to a place like that. Now it just clarified things. These weren't people who'd made an honest mistake about money. These were people who'd decided, comfortably, that my daughter and I were the kind you discard, and then congratulated themselves on their good taste. My father had used a gentler word. Greedy. He was being kind. I went upstairs to my daughter and we frosted cookies, and I let them have one more night of thinking they'd won. On Christmas Eve morning, I sat with Ruth one last time to be certain I wasn't fooling myself. I've watched too many families tear each other apart over money to trust my own read without a second opinion. Ruth gave it to me straight, point by point. The deed was clean and recorded. The house was mine, and no promise my mother made could change that. The quitclaim I'd prepared, the gift, was ready whenever I chose to sign it, or not. The debts I'd paid, the credit card, the business loan, were documented down to the penny, and the checks I'd written to erase the rest were good. Legally, Ruth said, you hold every card at that table. The house, the debts, all of it. The only question left is what kind of person you want to be when you play them. That stopped me, because she was right. I could walk in and be cruel. I could evict my mother into the snow, exactly the way they meant to cast out Lily and me. I could let Todd and Megan drown in the debt I had the power to erase. God knows a part of me wanted to. But then I heard my father again. Choose the child. Choose the home. He never once said, become them. So I made my decisions before I ever walked through that door, in Ruth's quiet office, where I could think clearly. I would tell the truth, publicly and completely. I would protect Lily first. I would not let the liars keep their prize. But I would not put innocent people in the cold to do it, and there were innocents here. My mother's fear was real even if her choices were wrong, and Megan's kids had done nothing. I know what kind of person I want to be, I told Ruth. She nodded and gathered her coat. Then I'll see you at dinner, she said. Merry Christmas, Anna. 1 day left. Actually, less than that now. Just hours. Before I left Ruth's office, she told me the last thing, the piece that turned my sadness into something harder. She'd heard through the small-town grapevine that runs through every lawyer's office that Megan had already consulted an attorney of her own. Not about a loan. About me. Megan had been asking whether our mother could legally exclude me from any claim to the house, and whether my instability could be documented in case I made trouble. She'd been building a paper case to match the whispering campaign. My own sister had sat in a lawyer's office and calmly explored how to prove I was an unfit, unstable woman, so that she could take a house out from under me, all while smiling at me on the phone and offering me a quiet, restful Christmas. I sat in my car in the cold and let myself feel the full weight of it, once, so I wouldn't feel it later when I needed to be steady. This was the deepest cut, and it hadn't even come from my mother yet. It came from the sister I'd cleared a bank loan for without ever mentioning it. I had quietly saved Megan from collections in the spring. That same season, she was quietly shopping for a way to brand me crazy. That is the exact asymmetry my father saw coming. One of us documented to protect, the other documented to destroy. I wiped my eyes exactly once and started the car. There was no more wondering left in me, no more hoping I'd misjudged them. I knew, and knowing, fully, is what let me walk into that farmhouse the next night with a calm that would unsettle every person in the room. You can't be ambushed by people whose whole plan you've already read. You can only decide in advance how much mercy they've earned. I decided on the drive home. Some, but not the house. Never the house. And never 1 inch of my daughter. Here's where it turns. They were about to give away a house that wasn't theirs, and I was the only one in that room who knew it. If you're rooting for the quiet one to finally speak, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the moment. The Christmas table is set. Let's walk in together. Christmas Day, Lily woke me at 6, vibrating with joy, and for a few hours I let the world be simple. We opened our small gifts in the apartment, just the two of us. She got the art set she'd circled in the catalog and a book about horses, and she hugged me so hard I forgot, for a while, what the evening held. We baked in the afternoon, a tray of sugar cookies shaped like stars, because Lily insisted we bring some to share. We wrapped the presents I'd bought for everyone. And yes, I wrapped the ones for Megan and Todd too, a scarf for her, work gloves for him, chosen back when I still hoped. Lily helped me tie the bows. "Grandma's going to love the tree topper," she said, because we'd bought a new star for the farmhouse tree, gold, to replace the one that had gotten bent. I watched my daughter carefully curl ribbon with the edge of the scissors, her tongue poking out in concentration, and I thought, they have no idea who they're dealing with. Not me. Her. This child who saves cookies for people and picks out gold stars for a house that already belongs to her mother. That's what they'd decided to throw away to plug a hole in their own boat. As we loaded the car in the early dark, Lily chattering the whole time, I felt the two halves of the night ahead. There was the mother getting her daughter ready for Christmas at Grandma's, ordinary and warm. And there was the woman with a folder tucked under the seat that could level the whole family. Both of them were me. I buckled Lily in, checked that the folder was there, and pulled out onto the road to Millbrook. 20 minutes, snow starting to fall. My daughter singing carols in the back seat, on our way to the last Christmas that family would ever spend thinking I was the small one. The farmhouse was lit up like a postcard when we arrived, every window gold, cars packed along the drive. Inside, it was loud and warm and full. Megan and Todd were there, of course, and their 2 kids, and a scatter of cousins, and Aunt Sandra, and even a few of my mother's friends from church, invited to witness her big moment. The blue spruce stood in the front yard under fresh snow, my father's tree, and Lily ran straight to press her mittens against it before we even got inside. I carried in the cookies and the wrapped gifts and the folder in my bag, and I felt the room adjust to me, the small stiffening, the glances traded. My mother came out of the kitchen with her apron on and her smile arranged. "Anna," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You made it." She sounded like a woman whose plans had hit a snag. Megan gave me a little wave from across the room, cool and careful, watching to see if her phone calls had worked. They hadn't. I set the cookies on the table and helped Lily out of her coat and let her run off to play with her cousins by the tree inside. For a while, it was almost normal, the noise of a family Christmas, and I moved through it calm and pleasant, greeting people, complimenting the ham. Ruth arrived a little after us, quiet in a gray coat, and my mother blinked at her, confused, before manners took over. "Ruth came as my guest," I said lightly, and left it there. Then, as the meal was winding toward dessert, my mother caught my arm in the hallway by the coats, away from the others. Her fingers were tight. I thought for one foolish second that she wanted a private moment, a hug, a thank you I'd never asked for. That's not what she wanted. She lowered her voice and told me she needed me to do something, and the something was leave. "Anna," my mother said, quiet and quick in that hallway, "I think it's best if you and Lily head home before we do the family part of the evening." I asked her what the family part was. She couldn't quite meet my eyes. "It's just going to be complicated," she said, "and you've had such a hard year, and I don't want a scene. Megan and Todd have some news, and it's really more for the settled part of the family." The settled part of the family, as if Lily and I were a rough draft. I kept my voice even. "You're asking me to take my daughter and leave on Christmas." She had the grace to flinch, but only a little. "Don't make it dramatic," she said. "You're always so dramatic. It's better this way. We'll have a nicer time, all of us, if it's simple." And there it was, one of the 2 sentences I'll never forget. We'll have a nicer time without the complication. Without me. Without my child. I might have kept it together and quietly gone, if not for what happened next. Lily had come looking for me, and she'd heard more than a 7-year-old should. She stood at the end of the hall in her Christmas dress, holding the gold star we'd bought for the tree, and she looked up at me with her whole small face trying to understand. "Mommy," she said, "is it because we're not real family?" The hallway went silent. My mother opened her mouth and closed it. And every soft feeling I had left, every excuse I'd ever made for these people, went quiet and clean and cold, like a monitor flatlining. My father's words rose up in me, steady as a hand on my shoulder. "Choose the child. Every time. Without 1 second of guilt." I knelt down in front of my daughter and I fixed the little bow on her dress, and I said, loud enough to carry, "No, baby, it's not you. Come on, let's go say something to everyone first." Then I stood up, took her hand, and walked us both straight into the dining room. The dining room was full and bright, the long table crowded with my family and my mother's friends, the good china out, candles lit. Conversation dropped as Lily and I stepped in. My mother hurried after us, flustered now, and Megan rose halfway from her chair, sensing something off script. My mother, cornered and wanting it over, decided to just push through. She cleared her throat and addressed the table with a bright, brittle voice. "Since we're all here," she said, "Megan and Todd have some wonderful news, and I have a little gift to make it official. I've decided to sign the farmhouse over to them. It's what's best for the family." A murmur went around the table. Todd sat back, proud. Megan's eyes flicked to me, then to Lily, and she made a small, tight decision of her own. She looked at my daughter, the child who'd just asked if she was real family, and she went for the kill in front of everyone. "And honestly," Megan said, "maybe it's for the best if Anna sits this one out. This is for the settled part of the family. This house isn't yours, Anna. Don't ever come back." My mother, relieved to have someone else say it, nodded quickly. "We'll have a better Christmas without you." There they were, both sentences, out loud in front of the whole family, exactly the way I'd first told them to you. Aunt Sandra gasped. One of the church friends set down her fork. Lily's hand tightened in mine. And I, standing in the doorway of a house I had bled a year of my life to save, felt something almost like peace. Because they'd finally said it in public, on the record, in front of witnesses, the cruelty they'd only ever whispered before. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked to the table, into the light, and I set my thin folder down right in the middle of it, between the gravy and the good china. I looked at my mother, and then at my sister, and I let a small, calm smile settle on my face. "All right," I said. "Then you won't mind what I'm about to do." I opened the folder slowly, and the room leaned in without meaning to. I took out the first document and laid it flat where everyone could see, though most couldn't read it from where they sat. "This is a deed," I said. My voice stayed low and even, a bedside voice, the one I use to deliver news that changes a life. "It's for this house, this farmhouse, and the name on it isn't Mom's." I let that sit for one breath. "It's mine." My mother laughed, a nervous little sound. "Anna, don't be ridiculous. This is my house." I slid the deed an inch toward her. "It was going to auction in the spring, Mom. Default. The bank was going to sell it on the courthouse steps to whoever showed up." Faces around the table started to change. Nobody told me, but Ruth did. So I took every dollar I saved from 3 years of travel contracts, and I stood at that auction in March, and I bought this house. Free and clear. In my name. Silence. The real kind. The kind that has weight. Todd's proud posture had gone rigid. Megan's face was doing something complicated. "That's not," my mother started and stopped. Ruth spoke then, from her quiet place along the wall, her voice dry and absolutely certain. "It's recorded at the county, Carol. I filed it myself. Anna has owned this property since March. You can't sign over what you don't own. There's nothing to give." You could have heard the snow falling. My mother sank into her chair like her legs had quit. Megan's eyes went straight to the folder, to the papers still inside it, calculating fast, because Megan always calculated. And I understood she'd realized what this meant for the refinance, for the debt, for the boat they were bailing with a teaspoon. Their entire plan had just been built on a house that had never, for one day that whole year, belonged to the person promising it. I hadn't raised my voice once. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the work now, and it was so much heavier than a shout. I reached into the folder again, because they needed to understand the whole size of what they'd done. I took out the quitclaim deed, the one Ruth had drawn up weeks before, and I held it so my mother could see it. "Do you know what this is?" I asked her gently. She shook her head, dazed. "This is a gift," I said. I had Ruth prepare it in November. It signs this house back to you, Mom. Free of the mortgage because I already paid that off when I bought it. No debt. No bank. Yours again. Clean. For the rest of your life. I watched the words hit her. That was your Christmas present. I was going to hand it to you tonight. At this dinner. At your family meeting. I was going to give you